Hi there. For Native American Heritage Month, I cannot recommend enough Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, an Indigenous woman and professor of ecological plant biology at the State University of New York. I don't have the book with me anymore because I recently returned it to the library, but her book weaves Indigenous wisdom, plant ecology, and exquisite prose into a love song to human life and the planet we all share. I've always, since early childhood, had a love for the humanities and arts, but I've also always been curious about biology, especially plant biology, so I love the way that this book weaved those things together. I actually wrote a journal entry about a month ago on my scientific curiosities about plants, which reads, "Life moves energetically, forcefully, anticipatorily along tiny molecules, carrying water from the roots of a 10-foot tall tree up to its leaves, drop by drop. Sunlight becomes sugar, and sugar becomes air. Saplings become trees, and trees bear nuts and cones and acorns and more saplings. Plants provide for all others with their attractive and succulent fruits, their buried and treasured tubers and taproots, their nectarous and perfume-bearing flowers, and are provided for by the unending abundance of sun, air, earth, rivers, and bees, those wonderful winged things wired to keep zesting for life, to keep consuming, constructing, creating, and procreating incessantly, religiously, as if ordained to do so by some infinite life-giving spirit that seeks to see itself created and made in endless forms, most selfish and most beautiful." Now, the way that Kimmerer's book weaves together humanism and ecology made it perfect for me. It deepened my relationship with the world around me. Before Indigenous homelands were taken, before tribes were forced to choose between the threat of being removed from their homelands, which weren't protected by the US Constitution, or subscribing to individual property rights to escape that constant threat, before all of that, there was another way of belonging, a deep wisdom of the earth, born from the belief that land was not to be owned but held in common, in kinship. This book restores that wisdom, the wisdom of Mother Earth, carried through generations despite removal, allotment, and the relentless pressure to surrender, quote, land held in common. Rugged individualism and the myth of scarcity have blinded us to what Mother Earth already provides for us in abundance. Take nuts, for example. I'm going to read a passage from the book. "Unlike juicy fruits and berries, which invite you to eat them right away before they spoil, nuts protect themselves with a hard, almost stony shell. They're designed to be food for the winter, when you need fat and protein, heavy calories to keep you warm. So rich is the reward that the contents are protected in a vault, double-locked, a box inside a box. The only way through a shell is work. A squirrel would be unwise to sit gnawing it in the open where a hawk could strike. So the nuts are carried inside, stored, saved, some forgotten, and then a tree is born." So there's this amazing way that nature is almost perfectly designed. Fruits are juicy and fresh and ready to eat right away, but nuts are double-locked because they're meant to be taken in and eaten inside. They're meant for squirrels to hoard them and store them away and save them for the winter when they need those higher calorie foods. So there's that interconnectedness of all beings, and Kimmerer is very interested in the communication as well between plants. She writes how, in the old times, our elders say the trees talk to each other. Science once dismissed this as a myth, but now we know, through pollen, through wind, through subterranean networks of roots and fungi, the forest has always been whispering. If the wind can be trusted with the responsibility of pollen, she says, why not with messages? So science is discovering what Indigenous wisdom has understood for a long time, that trees do communicate with each other. And that really beautiful idea of the wind being trusted with pollen, but with messages too. It feels magical, but it actually is also true. There's so much magic around us already, the magic of nature. And nature, as Kimmerer reminds us, doesn't only provide for the fittest, it provides for all. Let's read this quote. "The trees in a forest are often interconnected by subterranean networks of mycorrhizae. These fungal bridges appear to redistribute the wealth of carbs from tree to tree, a kind of Robin Hood, taking from the rich and giving to the poor, so that all trees arrive at a carbon surplus at the same time, through unity, survival." Speaking of fungi, an important point that Kimmerer, trained in Western science, makes is that, quote, "In scientific language, our terminology is used to define the boundaries of our knowing. What lies beyond our grasp remains unnamed. In other words, we don't have terms for things we don't know, only for things that we do. But aren't the things that we know as important as the things that we don't, if not more? In the Anishinaabe language, for instance, pupoi refers to the force which causes mushrooms to push up from the earth overnight, an elusive concept for which Western science provides no term. This process of decolonizing our language and the labels we've attached to natural objects can change our relationship with the world and ourselves. Kimmerer focuses on what she calls the grammar of animacy. Studying words for things that do not exist in our traditional vocabulary changes the way that we see and think about them. It reminds us the world is a much more wonderfully alive place than can ever be described by a single language or thought system. It reminded me of Ursula Le Guin's book, A Wizard of Earthsea, where it said that you must first learn the, quote, true name of each thing. And interestingly, Ursula Le Guin is quoted at this book at a different time. Kimmerer writes with the true humility and curiosity of a scientist. Not seeking to define the world on her own terms, but seeking to watch, admire, understand, and most of all, give thanks. Her words return us to the wonder that first drew us to science as children, when we spun around in circles to feel the world turn upside down, when we stared into bubbles or at the stars and asked why, when we were still unafraid of the mystery that surrounds us. Studying biology in high school, my favorite unit was the one that many others found the most boring. Plant biology and plant molecular physiology. A plant may seem still and lifeless, but inside, millions of molecular reactions are taking place that transform a seedling into a towering oak, that transform its tender green leaves into the fiery colors of dragon's breath each autumn, each leaf falling like a hot ember's spark. Kimmerer's book is a love song to the earth and reminds us where we really come from and to what a great, vast, abundant universe we belong.